Hey everybody, Dominic Cotroneo here. Welcome back to the channel. Sorry it's been a minute for one of these breakdowns. Life gets crazy sometimes, and obviously the road trip and the homestand, we're at Wrigley and all this stuff. But now we've got a 7-game homestand on our hands starting tonight. Brewers, Cardinals, 4-game set against the Redbirds, then 3 games with the Pirates next midweek. Then finally an off day, and we'll finally have some more content on that as well. So what I'm going to do with today's episode, today's a deep dive where we just kind of explore together. What I want to do today is I'm just going to set a timer and keep myself honest. I've got 4 topics that I want to do today. The 4 topics are Brice Turang's quantum leap. We're just going to actually dive into the numbers on that. William Contreras' framing numbers and why sample size matter and why framing numbers can be a little bit fickle sometimes. We're also going to talk about Brian Hudson's sweeper, which I wrote about in last week's column in WTMJ. You can find that WTMJ.com or on my social media at Dom_Cotroneo. And then finally, we're going to talk about Trevor McGill, who could be the closer moving forward for the Brewers, given the way he annihilated the side on Tuesday in Kansas City. It's only May. There's a lot of time to figure out how healthy is Yelly going to be, what is the prospect production going to be, when is Garrett Mitchell back, when is Devin Williams back. All that can be for another day and for the post-game shows. But for right now, we're diving deep into StatCast. So like I said at the top, we're going to keep ourselves honest here. We're going to start a 30-minute clock. So I'm putting it on my phone. I'm putting it on the screen right now for you as well. So we all stay honest. And 30 minutes to start our journey, starting with Brice Turang, starts right now. 30 minutes. Here we go. Brice Turang, holy cow, what a start to his season. Let's just go ahead and go to his baseball reference page here and see what we've got going on for Brice. And while I do that, I'll go ahead and make this screen a bit larger so everybody can see it. Brice Turang, just in the raw numbers here, I mean, 316 batting average, 100 points better, 100 points better, 144 points better. I mean, it's insane, the quantum leap. This is what a quantum leap looks like. But I've got a few notes here that I want to dive into. Let's go ahead and take a look at his Baseball Savant page now. And we see a lot of red here, which is already a good thing. But just quick eye test comparing the last year, right? And I don't mind all of these singles and a cluster of doubles over here. But just year over year, look at these superimposed over each other. That's just remarkable what the improvements are. So what are the few things that jump off right off the bat? For me, I'm looking at whiff rate, which was still really good last year, well above league average, 21.5 whiff rate, all the way down to 12% for his whiff rate so far this season. And thus, generally, these two go hand in hand when your strikeout rate goes down as well, which is why last year you felt maybe there was a little bit left to be desired given how often he was still striking out. I mean, the quality of contact speaks for itself, but the fact that he was striking out, not putting bat to ball, and having kind of a league average chase, learning what it takes in the big leagues. This is a big reminder, too. And The Athletic just posted a wonderful article on this today. The gap between AAA and the big leagues might be the biggest it's ever been right now. You get a year under your belt, you're allowed to fail, and we're seeing Brice Turang getting the benefit of being allowed to fail and being allowed to learn what he needs to improve on. So what are some of the things that jump off to me just on the first slider page? Obviously the whiff, the chase rate has improved. Yes, the quality of contact has certainly improved as well, but he's striking out less. So that tells me, let's go ahead and take a look at his 2-strike approach, which has been a massive piece of his success. So this are his career numbers with 2 strikes, 188, and I'll remind everybody, you're not supposed to hit with 2 strikes, but this is career, so that includes last year. When I pull up year over year, look at the difference here. 169 with 2 strikes, 262 with 2 strikes, albeit very small sample size. We're only a fourth of the way into his sample. But when you look a little bit deeper, 6 extra base hits last season, he's already got 6 this season. 5 doubles and a homer. Obviously, that helped by him going to the leadoff spot on Wednesday in Kansas City. OPS is up. I'm not worried about slugging with Brice. He's not the type of guy that needs to slug. Having an on-base over 300 with 2 strikes, think about that for a second. Your back is against the wall, and you're getting on base nearly 1 in 3 times when your back is against the wall. That's ridiculous. And just to prove my point, let's go ahead and look at the league average. So league average with 2 strikes, as we pop it up here, is 166. He's hitting 100 points better than league average with 2 strikes. A massive piece of his improvement so far this season. What are the other things that jump out to me about Brice Turang's improvement this year? So let's scroll a little down and start looking at the pitch tracking, shall we? Fastball is the first thing that jumps out at me. So let's go ahead and group it by the pitches. Right over here, year over year, you see the massive leap. 135 points better in just batting average alone. 50 points better or so in X batting average. His actual slugging has really jumped. Now, the X slugging is based on his quality of contact, and he's just not going to be an exit velocity darling. He's not a guy that wants to hit the ball in the air. But here are the big numbers that jump out to me. 9% whiff rate. He has more than chopped that in half year over year. And his WOBA is pretty much double, almost double of what he did year over year. Those are insane numbers. And when you look at the run value, we've talked about this before. He was literally the worst hitter against four-seam fastballs in baseball last season at a minus 17 run value. 22% of the time he whiffed, only a 200 batting average against four-seamers specifically. This number includes sinkers and cutters. But four-seamers specifically, he really, really struggled. This season, he's a positive run value against four-seamers, albeit small sample size, but he's seeing it about the same rate as he saw it a year ago. And 432 batting average on 47 plate appearances that have ended with a four-seam fastball. More than double what he did a year ago. And there he, again, slashing the whiff rate on fastballs in half. And then you go a little further. The hard hit rate. 50% hard hit rate versus a third of the time a hard hit rate against the fastest pitch that you're going to see. Those are massive improvements to his quantum leap this year. Another reason why he's being so successful against four-seamers, as we look up to his batted ball profile here, is he's not afraid to go to the opposite field this year. He's unlocked going to the opposite field. League average is 25%. Last year, he was still above league average in trying to hit the ball to the opposite field, and he's also well above league average when it comes to hitting it up the middle. That's remained constant. Turang's not your traditional lefty that wants to pull the ball all the time. That's not his game. And the fact that he has found more hits to the opposite field, he's hitting the balls in play 39% of the time to the opposite field, is going to lead me down a little bit of a rabbit hole here. So let's go to the search now. Let's go ahead and look up Brice Turang. Then let's watch some hits for him when it comes to batted ball direction, opposite field, and let's just go ahead and do, we don't want his overall, we want to just go ahead and see what he's averaging in his WOBA, PA hits, at-bat, single, double, home runs. Okay, make sure that's all good. And this is just on batted ball direction. This is just for 2024. Okay. Hitting 436 on balls hit to the opposite field. 6 doubles, 17 total hits to the opposite field. Now, I'm going to take one step further and go year over year. We don't want to combine these years, so we go player and year. That will split each season. So he had success going to the opposite field last year. He just rarely did it with authority. Only 2 extra base hits to the opposite field last year. Let's see if we can go ahead and find those doubles. Let's go ahead and watch. This is from last season.
That's going to be fair, heading.
That looks pretty familiar. That looks like this season, Brice Turang. Fastball up and away, handles it. It wasn't a high velo pitch, but he handles it, and he goes the opposite way. Let's find the other double here real quick. Breaking ball. So he waited on it. And look at that. Hey, it's old friend. It's Eric Haas out there in left field. So not a significantly great left fielder. I would be really intrigued to see what the StatCast says on the catch probability on this play. Because look how far over Green was playing. So those are the only 2 doubles he had last year. Only 2 extra base hits he had to the opposite field last season. So let me just go ahead and look at his hardest hits. So 102, 101, 101, 100, I mean, even the doubles weren't hit all that hard. Again, that's last season. So let's go to this season. 436 to the opposite field. Here we go. We got 103. We got 101. We got 100. So it's pretty similar to what we saw a year ago, but let's go to this double.
You can learn as a young player if you listen, paying attention. Listen.
Oppo down the line, fair. 96-2 from Palante.
Balls. From that one, he can't hit.
This was in his first AB as the leadoff hitter. And hey, look at that. Look, it all ties in. A 1-2 count on a 90 mile an hour exit velo on a fastball. It all tied in. Look at that. A four-seam fastball that he hit with 2 strikes to the opposite field for a double. That is exactly what we're talking about with Brice Turang's Quantum Leap. Spent a lot more time on that than I wanted to. So let's jump into the framing stuff now with William Contreras and catcher framing. Let me start with a quick disclaimer about catcher framing, and you can read all of this here on the StatCast leaderboard, but catcher framing, it's fickle. We praise it when it's good and it helps your team, and we kind of knock it when it's not. The numbers I'm about to show you don't mean that William Contreras is a bad catcher this season all of a sudden. A few pass balls have certainly hurt these numbers when it's catcher framing and that sort of thing. But I'm going to explain how the sample is going to grow this season and is going to get better. And a reminder, framing is just as dependent on the pitcher as it is on the catcher. So as we look at it, we see the best catchers at framing so far this season: Bo Naylor, Alejandro Kirk, Jose Trevino. But we have to scroll all the way down. Williams down here in 57th. What gives? He's there with Omar, with Luke Maile, Luis Campusano, JT Realmuto. And JT's had some tough framing numbers the last couple years. But let me explain why I'm not alarmed by this. First and foremost, let's go back to 2023. Let's start breaking this down last season. And we're going to toggle league average. William was one of the best framing catchers in baseball last year. But let's also start with the context. Corbin Burns is in the rotation. Freddie is one of the best pitchers in baseball in the second half of last year. He had a little bit of Brandon Woodruff. We had Wade Miley nipping at the corners. He had Adrian Hauser and his sinker. It was a very different pitching staff. I'm not blaming this current pitching staff, but a lot more strike throwers in there than the current pitching staff has. So that certainly helps. And still getting less than half of called strike rate in these pitches that are in the shadow. These are the only ones we're really measuring. Pitches that are in the shadow of the strike zone. You may see a little bit of blue, but you don't see a lot of dark red here. And that led me down a little peak here. When we look at William last season, he was below league average in just 2 of the 8 zones that we monitor. And this is the high glove side from the catcher perspective, zone 11. And then we can go over here to zone 14, which is his glove side. So I want to remember those 2 zones right now. And as we look into the small sample size of 2024, we're going to remember the high glove side and the standard glove side as we update and we toggle the league average once again, and we'll arrange it alphabetically. Here's William. Okay, high glove side, 16% called strike rate. That's a really hard pitch to get a called strike on. Oh, look at that. It's roughly league average. That's no big deal. Well, how about the glove side? The one that he really struggled with last season that wasn't as high. Oh, wait a minute. He's above league average at 61%, league average 59%. So when we go down this whole list, okay, virtually league average, below league average at the top of the zone. That's hard to call strikes on. Again, the high arm side from the catcher's perspective, he is well below league average at 15% versus 20%. Not a big deal. You're not going to get many pitches in that zone to get pulled down anyway. We go a little further. We already talked about the fact that he's over league average in zone 14 on the glove side. You look at the far side now, away to a righty. He doesn't have Corbin Burns cutters anymore. He doesn't have the same type of repertoire that he's able to pull more pitches back into. When we look at it, 61% is obviously 5 points below league average. Let's go ahead and take a peek back at 2023. How did he do in zone 15 last season? Or zone 16, I beg your pardon, last season. Zone 16, 65%. We look at league average. He was about 3 points better than league average. So he's 5 points worse than league average right now in 2024. So we rearrange by alphabetical, but still not far off of what his rate was last season. But he's still thriving at stealing strikes at the bottom of the zone. We made a whole breakdown about this last year. Let's talk about the league average again. Bottom of the zone. This is the bottom glove side. 35%, better than league average. 53%, better than league average. 22%, which is 2% off of league average. So it looks a whole lot worse than it actually is as we dive into what it actually takes. So we can even search it on the Major League search by catchers. So we're going to go into the attack zones here, the shadows of the zone. Let's just go ahead and look at zones 17, 18, and 19. That is the bottom of the zone right here. And the player we're going to be looking for is William Contreras. And what we want here is we want pitch result to be a called strike. Let's see if the mechanics are any different from just this last week.
Flagship, whatever. The kids loved it.
I mean, obviously the TV strike zone calls that a strike. That's close enough technically in StatCast eyes to go either way. Let's go a little older one here. Let's find one that's actually in the shadow. Patrick Wisdom here with Tobias Myers on the mound.
This year, not making out of the first inning.
That was huge because you look at the time, that bases loaded. He had struggled with command. Stealing a strike there on a breaking ball on Patrick Wisdom really helped Tobias Myers settle down. That was a really good pitch. We all know about that one. That one was the one that really stung. That was a great pitch from Brian Hudson. Sometimes you just don't get the calls, man. And judging by all those numbers we just showed you, Williams going to get his due as the pitchers get better. The mechanics look the same to me. I'm not worried about Williams' catching numbers. They will improve as the season goes on. Next up, let's talk about this man, Brian Hudson, and the year that he has had so far this year. What a breakout. And he was acquired, obviously, as we know, from the Dodgers roster crunch with Yoshinobu Yamamoto being signed. They had a full 40-man. He gets traded here to Brewers to make room for Yamamoto signing. And look at this red. My goodness. He has not allowed a barrel yet this year. Strikeout rate is great. Even though the fastball velo is very below average in Major League Baseball standards, he's below average whiff rates. He's a league average or so walk rate, and he gets a ton of strikeouts. So what gives? And if you've read my column, a lot of this is going to be repetitive from last Thursday. Let's go ahead and talk about what works specifically with the slider. We've talked about extension before, and as you can see here, his extension is one of the best in baseball. It helps to already be 6'8", but the fact that he's averaging almost 7.5 feet of extension, that's how much closer he is releasing the ball onto you. Meaning, just because you start at 60 feet, 6 inches away, in theory, as he's pitching downhill to you, he is releasing this baseball less than 53 feet away from you. That's just simply less time for you to make a decision. And when you do all of that, it makes maybe a so-so velo fastball look a lot faster than it is with perceived velocity, but it also allows you to tunnel the fastball and the sweeper and the cutter. Look how often it's in the zone. The cutter, all three of these pitches can play off of each other, and they're so great. And look at the numbers. Overall, they're just 1 for 24 against the sweeper. What is that one, you ask? Let's go back to base hits here. Let's show the pitches. There was the one pitch, and it was a good pitch. And it was the triple that led off that inning, and obviously we just showed the Patrick Wisdom called ball. That should have been strike 3.
That's the ballpark.
Look at that. I tip my cap, man. That's a great pitch. 0-1, sweeper to a lefty, left on left. He was out in front of it, stayed on it. What can he do? This is the big leagues. They're the best of the best. That's the only hit he has allowed against the sweeper this year. So you may be wondering, okay, well, Dom, let's go ahead and look at some of the underlying stuff. 30% whiff rate. It's above league average. Nothing crazy there. Nothing crazy in the whiff rates here as well. -2 launch angle. 12 strikeouts against it. It's specifically his success with that pitch against righties. 0 for 17, 9 strikeouts, a -11 average launch angle by right-handed hitters on the sweeper. They're not picking it up, and they're not hitting it well. Here's a left-on-left ground ball.
On the ground on your right side, Turang. Keep.
Really darn good pitch from Brian Hudson. So a couple of notes here to keep in mind. Only 14% of his sweepers have been called strikes. He's only got 11 called strikes on the sweeper. He did get a couple looking strikeouts this past week. But it's a pitch that's meant to get chased because hitters are deciding at the last possible moment. They're trying to decide whether or not it's a fastball. Because, look, the fastball is dotted right down the middle and a little bit elevated too. When it looks like it's a fastball right down the middle, then it sweeps down to below the zone. That's what you're seeing here against righties. He can backdoor it a little bit against righties, but against lefties, as it's working away from them, all they can really do is hit a ground ball. Then the cutter's trying to keep them honest, given he throws them equal amounts of time. The cutter's a pitch that just tries to keep them off the barrel. And judging by the average exit velocity, he has done a solid job. 89 miles an hour isn't super crazy, but it's the barrel rate that jumps out to me, that he has not allowed a barreled ball against him so far this year. Brian Hudson, going to be one of the most important relievers the rest of the year for the Brewers. Okay, and finally, as the countdown continues to wind, let's talk about Trevor McGill. Trevor McGill has been fantastic. Don't need you to hear that from me. But Trevor, reminder, he was in this A bullpen, if you will, last season when you had Devin, when you had McGill, when you had Uribe really coming into his own last season, while Payamps was starting to struggle with fatigue. Peguero was struggling with his first full season in the big leagues too. But the fact that McGill found this new curveball, he's been around the block a little bit. When we look at his baseball reference page, let's just go ahead and take a peek here. This dude's been in professional baseball since 2015, made his big league debut with the Cubs in 2021, and it was not pretty. 22 earned runs in 23 2/3 innings. He struck out 30, only walked 8, but he allowed 7 home runs. Then 2022 with the Twins, 45 innings, gave up a lot of singles, a lot of runs, trying to figure out what was going on, but the strikeouts were still there. And just look at his transactions. Taken by the Cubs in the Rule 5 draft, claimed off waivers by the Twins, granted free agency, came back with the Twins, traded by the Twins. Essentially, here you go. We don't have room for him anymore. And he's been so great for the Brewers since he found that curveball. What makes the curveball so great? 62% whiff rate on the curve. So let's just go ahead and look at a few of these whiffs, shall we? And here's the first few that he had this year.
1-1 debater, Nemo and Lindor to fall. Let's see the break it.
Garrett's supposed to be so proud.
Oof.
Not on the curveball.
The reason why the curveball plays so well for McGill,
His brother out.
you have to be honest for the fastball. We know the fastball is 100 miles an hour with heat. It's carrying. It's coming for you. You've got to make sure that you're on time for that fastball. So you're kind of selling out for one pitch and hoping he hangs a curveball that you would be on time for it. But his command with the breaking ball has been a massive piece of his success. So let's just go ahead and clear swinging strikes. Let's just do all swings, called strikes with the curveball. So this is his total called strike whiff rate when it comes to his breaking balls. 19%. But when you pair that curveball with his fastball, and this is just a total search I did, minimum 50 pitches, 4-seam fastballs, average ride, average carry, average inverted vertical break, the induced vertical break, I should say, IVB. Highest carry fastballs, Tristan McKenzie, Alex Vezia, Nick Pivetta, Cutter Crawford, Christian Javier. You scroll a little bit down here, Trevor McGill, 19 inches. Right there within an inch and a half of the guys with the best curveballs or best fastball ride in the game. When you pair a carrying fastball with a diving curveball, you're going to get a lot of swing and miss. And that is exactly what he has been doing this season. Okay, I stayed within the timeline. I'm really happy with it. We did a little 30-minute quick crash course on some StatCast topics with the Brewers. Hope you tune into post-game shows all weekend long, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Redbirds are in town. It should be a whole lot of fun. You can listen on 620 WTMJ. You can listen to it on the radio. You can listen to it online or over on the Brewers, or rather on WTMJ's YouTube page, 620 WTMJ. All of these shows are streamed live there as well if you want to stick to YouTube. So thank you to everybody who sat and watched and enjoyed these and asked for more of these. I'm going to make some shorter ones too that are meant for more social sharing, but these are for the nerds like you and me that want to learn as much as we can about baseball using the numbers that we have. And keep an eye out. Next week, Baseball Savant's rolling out a brand new feature. I've been able to toy around with it a little bit. The bat tracking and all that fun stuff that's coming. I've had access to some of the bat tracking stuff on the baseball research portal, but now it's going to be publicly available on Baseball Savant. Those leaderboards drop next week. They're going to be sweet, and we have a whole new frontier to explore with these sort of videos. So thank you to everybody who watched. Hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, keep on swinging.